The tension hit a new level the moment word started spreading that something behind the scenes wasn't going according to plan. Fans woke up to whispers instead of headlines, and somehow that made it feel even heavier. This wasn't a loud courtroom moment or a dramatic filing splashed across blogs. This was quiet, calculated, and according to insiders, it backfired in ways nobody inside OTF was prepared for. Sources close to the situation say Lil Durk's legal team believed they were making a smart, low-key move, the kind of move meant to calm things down, buy time, and keep control of the narrative. But instead of easing pressure, it reportedly triggered a new wave of concern. Emotions ran high as word traveled through inner circles that the plan didn't land the way it was supposed to. Suddenly, the silence felt risky. Fans are shocked by how fast the mood shifted. So, chit. Just days ago, people thought the quiet meant confidence. Now, the same quiet feels tense, like everyone is waiting for the next shoe to drop. Insiders claim OTF members started having serious conversations not just about the case, but about preparation, contingency plans. "We need to be ready for anything," one voice allegedly said, sending chills through those who heard it. And here's where it gets even more complicated. There are rumors that the backfire didn't come from the courtroom itself, but from how the move was perceived behind closed doors. Some believe it raised new questions instead of closing old ones. Others think it exposed cracks that were never meant to be seen. Either way, the pressure is mounting, and everyone involved knows that perception can be just as dangerous as facts. What makes this moment different is the reaction. Instead of panic in public, there's focus in private. OTF isn't lashing out, they're bracing, preparing, watching closely. Fans are already speculating about what that preparation really means, and whether it signals confidence or concern. Because if this quiet move really did backfire, then the next decision won't be small. And with the pressure building and eyes everywhere, what happens next could change the entire direction of the case and the people standing behind it. The first signs that the quiet move had backfired didn't come from the courtroom, they came from the phone calls that started happening late at night. According to people close to the situation, the tone inside OTF changed fast. What was supposed to be a calm, strategic pause suddenly felt like a countdown. The silence that once suggested control now carried weight, and every unanswered question made the pressure feel heavier. Sources say Lil Durk's legal team believed discretion would work in their favor. No headlines, no sound bites, no public reaction, just a carefully planned step meant to slow everything down. But the reaction they didn't anticipate came from the other side of the table. Whispers began circulating that the move raised new concerns instead of resolving old ones. Nothing official, nothing public, just enough uncertainty to shift the mood completely. Inside OTF, emotions ran high as word spread. People started asking questions that hadn't been asked before. What does this really mean? Why are they still looking into this? Are we missing something? Those questions didn't come from panic, but from instinct. When a plan is supposed to reduce pressure and instead increases it, everyone feels it. Conversations that used to be confident became cautious. And preparation quietly replaced celebration. Fans are shocked by how little information is actually coming out. Normally, even small developments spark instant reactions online, but this time, there was nothing to grab onto, and that absence became the story. Reaction channels speculated non-stop. Some took the silence as proof that everything was fine. Others believed it was a sign that things were getting more serious behind the scenes. The internet split into camps, each convinced they could read between the lines better than the other. Meanwhile, Durk himself reportedly stayed focused, at least on the surface. Sources claim he was calm, measured, and deliberate in how he handled the growing tension. But people close to him noticed subtle changes. Longer conversations, more questions for the legal team, fewer assumptions. When someone asked how he was feeling, he allegedly responded with one word: ready. That word alone fueled speculation. Ready for what? The legal team, according to insiders, began reassessing their approach almost immediately. Meetings stretched longer, notes were revisited, angles that were once dismissed were reconsidered. No one wanted to admit the move had backfired, but everyone could feel the shift. One source described it as realizing the room got colder without knowing exactly why. When that happens, strategy becomes survival. Inside OTF's inner circle, the conversation turned toward preparation. Not just legal preparation, but mental and emotional readiness. "We can't be caught off guard," one person reportedly said. "Whatever comes next, we need to be ahead of it." That mindset spread quickly. People started tightening communication, limiting who knew what, and paying closer attention to every development, no matter how small. Fans noticed the change too. Posts felt different, appearances felt more controlled. Even the absence of certain moves became noticeable. Emotions ran high online as people debated whether this was a sign of strength or stress. Some argued that preparation meant confidence. You only prepare when you expect to win. Others believed it was the opposite, that preparation meant bracing for impact. Adding to the tension were rumors that the quiet move may have triggered a deeper review than expected. Nothing confirmed, nothing documented publicly, but enough hints to keep speculation alive. People claimed to know someone who knew someone who heard that questions were being asked again. Fans are shocked by how quickly unverified information can feel real when official updates are scarce. Within the legal team, there was reportedly frustration mixed with determination. They hadn't made the move lightly, and the idea that it could create new complications wasn't easy to accept. But instead of pulling back, they leaned in. Side of one insider said, "This is where you find out if a plan is strong or just clever." That attitude set the tone for what came next. Durk's camp began preparing for multiple outcomes. Not because they expected the worst, but because they refused to be unprepared. Discussions reportedly covered everything from timing to messaging to how certain scenarios would be handled publicly if needed. The goal wasn't damage control, it was control, period. The fans, watching from the outside, sensed that something was different even if they couldn't explain it. The energy around the case felt heavier, more serious. Less rumor-driven, more consequential. People stopped joking in comment sections and started analyzing timelines, past statements, and legal language. Emotions ran high as the story shifted from spectacle to suspense. By the end of this phase, one thing was clear: the quiet move didn't end the pressure, it transformed it. What started as an attempt to slow things down forced everyone involved to sharpen their focus. OTF wasn't reacting anymore, they were preparing. And as part one of this story closes, the question isn't whether something is coming, it's whether anyone on the outside will see it before it arrives. As the pressure continued to build, the second phase of the story unfolded in a way that felt quieter on the surface but heavier underneath. The calm wasn't reassuring anymore, it was unsettling. People close to the situation say this was the moment when everyone involved realized that preparation wasn't optional, it was necessary. The quiet move hadn't just failed to relieve pressure, it had shifted attention in unexpected directions. Inside the legal camp, discussions reportedly took on a more serious tone. The strategy that once felt airtight was now being examined from every angle. "Assume nothing," one person allegedly said during a closed-door meeting. That mindset changed the room. Assumptions were challenged. Timelines were revisited. Even small details that once seemed irrelevant were suddenly treated like potential pressure points. Emotions ran high, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility. OTF's inner circle felt the ripple effect almost immediately. Conversations that used to be casual turned deliberate. Phone calls were shorter but more frequent. People became careful about what they said and, more importantly, what they didn't say. Sources claim there was a growing sense that perception outside the room mattered just as much as what was actually happening inside it. When narratives start forming without facts, silence can either protect you or expose you, and no one was sure which way it would go. Fans are shocked by how little clarity there is. Number 6. Usually even vague updates spark confident takes online. This time, the lack of information created a vacuum that speculation rushed to fill. Some fans believed the pressure meant something major was coming. Others argued it was simply part of a longer process. The comment sections became less about arguing sides and more about reading signs, timestamps, wording, who liked what, who didn't. Meanwhile, Durk's presence remained controlled. People around him say he understood the stakes and refused to let uncertainty dictate his behavior. There were no emotional reactions, no impulsive moves. If anything, he appeared more focused than ever. "This is about patience," he allegedly told someone close. That patience, however, didn't mean inactivity. It meant letting preparation speak louder than reaction. Behind the scenes, OTF began quietly reinforcing its structure. Sources say conversations expanded beyond legal matters into trust and communication. Who needs to know what and when? How do you protect people from unnecessary stress while still staying ready? These weren't dramatic discussions, but they were serious. The family was left divided emotionally in the sense that everyone felt the weight differently, even if the goal remained shared. Another layer of tension came from outside voices. Industry insiders, commentators, and distant affiliates started hinting that they were watching closely. None of it direct, none of it specific, but enough to add pressure. Fans are shocked by how much influence suggestion alone can have. A single vague comment can send timelines into overdrive, turning speculation into perceived truth overnight. Then came the rumors about a second development, not a move, but a reaction to the move. Whispers suggested that the quiet step had triggered additional scrutiny instead of calming the waters. Again, nothing confirmed, but the idea spread quickly. Emotions ran high as people debated whether this meant the strategy had truly backfired or whether this was simply part of a longer expected process. The lack of answers only made the story feel bigger. Inside OTF, preparation evolved into discipline. Sources say there was an emphasis on consistency, saying less, moving smarter, staying aligned. "We can't afford mixed signals," one voice reportedly warned. That advice stuck. Posts were measured. Appearances were considered carefully. Even silence was timed. Every action, or lack of action, was intentional. Fans watching closely noticed the shift. The energy felt different from previous moments of controversy. There was less chaos, more tension, less noise, more anticipation. People started talking about the long game, about waiting rather than reacting. Emotions ran high not because of what was happening, but because of what might happen next. Durk's legal team, according to insiders, began preparing explanations for multiple scenarios not to release publicly, but to ensure internal clarity. Understanding possible outcomes, even unlikely ones, became part of staying ahead. This wasn't about expecting the worst, it was about refusing to be surprised. The quiet move had taught everyone a lesson. Unpredictability doesn't always come with warnings. As days passed, the narrative continued to evolve without a single official update. Fans are shocked by how engaged they remain without concrete information. Every small detail feels amplified. Every pause feels meaningful. The pressure mounts not because of dramatic events, but because of uncertainty itself. By the end of part 2, the situation feels heavier than before. The quiet move didn't just backfire, it changed the tempo. Everything slowed down, but the stakes rose. OTF is no longer just watching closely, they're bracing with intention. And while the outside world waits for a moment to react to, those inside know the real story is being written in preparation, not in headlines. As the situation moved deeper into its third phase, the pressure stopped feeling theoretical and started feeling personal. What had once been a distant legal cloud now felt like something hovering directly overhead. People close to the situation say this was the moment when preparation turned into vigilance. Every sound felt louder, every pause felt longer, and every decision carried more weight than before. Inside OTF, the atmosphere reportedly shifted again. The early stages had been about strategy, then discipline. Now it was about endurance. Sources say there was an unspoken understanding that this wasn't going to resolve quickly. "This is a long road," one person allegedly said during a private conversation. That realization forced everyone to confront how much patience they really had. Durk himself, according to insiders, became even more guarded. Not distant, but focused. Those around him noticed he asked more questions than usual, not just about the case, but about timing and perception. What happens if nothing happens? He reportedly asked at one point, highlighting the anxiety that comes with waiting. It wasn't fear, it was awareness. Waiting can be just as stressful as action. The legal team doubled down on monitoring everything. Not just filings or official updates, but conversations happening in the background. Sources claim they were paying attention to who was speaking, who wasn't, and how narratives were shifting online. The quiet move had taught them that influence doesn't always come from the obvious places. Sometimes pressure builds through implication rather than fact. Fans are shocked by how intense the speculation has become without any new information. Reaction channels began dissecting silence itself, treating the absence of updates like evidence. People argued over whether the lack of news meant progress or problems. Emotions ran high as timelines filled with theories framed as certainty. For many fans, the waiting became more consuming than the drama ever was. Within OTF's inner circle, trust became a central topic. Sources say conversations focused on tightening communication and making sure everyone was aligned. "We can't afford confusion," one person reportedly said. When pressure mounts, even small misunderstandings can spiral. That awareness led to fewer voices speaking and more listening, less emotion, more calculation. Another complication emerged when whispers began circulating about potential consequences beyond the immediate case. Nothing concrete, nothing confirmed, just enough suggestion to raise concern. Some believed it was exaggerated, others worried it was understated. The uncertainty made it hard to separate reality from rumor, and that tension seeped into every conversation. Emotions ran high because no one knew which version of the story would eventually prove true. Durk supporters remained vocal, but even their tone shifted. Instead of confidence, there was caution. Fans rallied around messages of patience and strength, encouraging each other not to jump to conclusions. Still, doubt crept in. The longer things stayed unresolved, the harder it became to ignore the weight of possibility. The family was left divided emotionally in the sense that everyone processed the stress differently, even while standing together publicly. Behind the scenes, there were also reports of quiet outreach. Not negotiations, not deals, just conversations meant to feel out the landscape. Sources say these efforts were exploratory, not reactive. Understanding where things stood became just as important as influencing where they were going. This wasn't about forcing outcomes. It was about avoiding surprises. The internet, however, wasn't interested in patience. Fans demanded answers. Some accused the silence of being manipulative. Others praised it as disciplined. Debates flared up over what the right response should be. Fans are shocked by how easily opinion replaces information when uncertainty lingers. Every post became a referendum on intent rather than fact. Inside the legal team, the focus turned toward resilience, preparing not just for outcomes, but for the emotional toll of prolonged uncertainty. Sources say there were discussions about managing stress, protecting focus, and avoiding burnout. "This isn't just legal," one insider allegedly said, "it's mental." That acknowledgement marked a shift from purely tactical thinking to holistic preparation. As days turned into weeks, the quiet began to feel heavy. 206, not empty, but full of possibility. Every hour without news added to the tension rather than easing it. People close to the situation say this was the hardest part, not knowing when the waiting would end or what it would end with. Emotions ran high because anticipation leaves little room for rest. By the end of part 3, the story no longer feels like it's building toward a single moment. Instead, it feels like it's reshaping everyone involved. Habits change under pressure, and priorities shift. Patience is tested. OTF isn't just preparing for what's next, they're adapting to a new normal where uncertainty is constant and silence speaks louder than words. And as the pressure continues to mount without resolution, one question hangs over everything. When the next move finally comes, will it bring clarity or will it deepen the uncertainty even further? Because at this stage, everyone understands one thing: the quiet isn't calm anymore, it's the sound of something waiting to happen. As the final stretch of this story unfolds, the pressure that had been building quietly finally begins to settle into something heavier and more permanent. Not because a dramatic announcement drops or a headline explodes, but because everyone involved starts to understand that this situation has changed the way they move forever. The waiting itself has become the consequence. Inside OTF, sources say there was a moment of realization that preparation had done all it could do. Plans were in place, scenarios had been discussed, contingencies were mapped out. Now it was about acceptance. One person close to the circle reportedly said, "We've done everything we can control, the rest is out of our hands." That shift marked a turning point. The energy moved from vigilance to resolve. Durk, according to those around him, leaned into routine, not as distraction but as grounding. When uncertainty stretches on, structure becomes protection. Friends say he focused on what he could control: his work, his circle, his discipline. There were fewer conversations about outcomes and more about endurance. "Whatever happens, we stand on how we moved," he allegedly said, reinforcing the idea that integrity mattered just as much as results. The legal team mirrored that mindset. Instead of constantly revisiting worst-case scenarios, they focused on readiness without obsession. Sources say the tone shifted from reactive to steady. The quiet move that once felt like a miscalculation had forced everyone to sharpen their approach. Mistakes weren't denied, they were absorbed. Lessons were learned without being spoken out loud. Fans are shocked by how calm things appear on the surface despite the heavy tension underneath. The chaos they expected never came. Instead, there was restraint, fewer leaks, fewer side comments, fewer emotional reactions. In a digital world fueled by instant gratification, that kind of silence felt unfamiliar. Some fans interpreted it as confidence, others saw it as exhaustion. Both could be true. Within OTF, conversations turned inward. Sources say there was a renewed emphasis on loyalty and trust. Pressure has a way of revealing who belongs in the room and who doesn't. Lines were quietly redrawn, access tightened. Not out of fear, but out of clarity. The family was left divided emotionally in the sense that everyone processed the stress differently, yet they remained aligned in purpose. Outside voices slowly began to fade. Commentators who once speculated non-stop shifted their attention elsewhere. Reaction videos slowed. Theories lost urgency without new fuel. The internet moved on, as it always does. But those closest to the situation knew that the absence of noise didn't mean the absence of impact. Some moments don't explode, they reshape quietly. There were still whispers. Of course, rumors never disappear completely, but they lacked the energy they once had. Without reactions to bounce off of, speculation couldn't sustain itself. Fans are shocked by how quickly attention shifts when there's nothing to react to. Silence, when maintained long enough, becomes its own form of closure. Privately, there was also reflection. Sources say people involved began looking back at the choices made, not with regret, but with honesty. What worked? What didn't? What would be done differently next time? Pressure has a way of clarifying priorities. What once felt urgent no longer did. What once felt distant suddenly mattered deeply. Durk's camp, according to insiders, accepted that whatever outcome eventually comes, the experience itself has already left a mark. Trust in systems, patience with process, and awareness of perception all evolved. You don't come out of something like this the same, one person reportedly said. That wasn't said with bitterness, it was said with understanding. Fans watching from the outside began to sense that the story had reached a different kind of ending, not the kind marked by a verdict or a statement, but by a shift in tone. The tension didn't disappear, it matured. People stopped asking, "What's next?" and started asking, "What did this change?" Those questions linger longer than headlines ever do. As time passed, the quiet move that once felt like a mistake began to look different. Not successful, not disastrous, just formative. It forced preparation, it exposed pressure points, it revealed how people respond when control slips. In that sense, it did exactly what moments of stress always do. It showed the truth of the structure underneath. In the end, this chapter closes without a dramatic finish. There's no viral clip to replay, no quote to analyze, no single moment to point to as the climax. Instead, there's distance, discipline, and a deeper understanding of what's at stake. Sometimes the loudest moments come and go. Sometimes the quiet ones stay with you. And while fans may move on to the next story, those involved carry this one forward. The pressure mounted, the quiet move backfired, and preparation became survival. What happens next may eventually become public, or it may remain behind closed doors. Either way, the impact is already there. Because in the world of high-stakes moments, not every ending is explosive. Some endings are solid, steady, unresolved, but understood. And for those paying attention, that may be the most revealing outcome of all. Now, before you click away, let's be real for a second. This story is far from over, and what happens next could change everything. Pressure doesn't just disappear. It either breaks people or reshapes them, and right now, everyone involved is standing at that exact crossroads. The quiet moves, the preparation, the distance, none of it happened by accident. And if you've been paying attention, you already know the situation isn't done revealing its layers. Fans are still divided. Some believe this silence is a sign of confidence, others think it's the calm before something much bigger, and that's the part we want to hear from you. Do you think the pressure is finally easing, or is it quietly building toward another major turn? Did the quiet move really backfire, or did it force everyone to move smarter behind the scenes? Because depending on how this plays out, the next development could come when nobody expects it. If you made it this far, that tells us one thing: you care about the truth behind the headlines, not just the surface level drama. So make sure you hit that like button to let the algorithm know these deep dives matter. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because we're staying on top of every twist, every shift, and every move that happens next, whether it plays out loud or stays behind closed doors. And most importantly, drop a comment right now. Tell us where you stand. Fles, do you think preparation is a sign of strength or a sign of concern? Do you believe silence is the smartest move, or does it leave too many questions unanswered? Your opinions drive these conversations, and trust us, we're reading them all. This story isn't finished, and neither is the conversation. Stay locked in, stay sharp, and stay right here, because the next chapter could drop at any moment, and you won't want to miss it.